All right, thank you very much. It's great to be down the road virtually for a few minutes this morning. If you hear my dog barking, that is just because the postman parks in front of our house right now. So I'm here representing the Waterloo Institute for Complexity and Innovation. I'm a core member and the former director, and Christopher Nianev, who is currently the CNCS coordinator for Wiki, also a core member, is here with us today. So the idea for the Canadian Network for Complex Systems probably occurred, as most things do for me, on a dog walk, trying to envision where our Complex Systems Center would go next, and always troubled by the feeling that we are below critical mass, looking for a way to overcome that obstacle. And the idea that I proposed at that time that received a pretty enthusiastic response is to create a Canadian network for complex systems. These networks exist in other countries, France, the Netherlands, a couple other countries. What was the rationale for this? The first thing is it's the right scale. Basically, when we think of Canada as a country in our university system, we're relatively small. We're large enough to have a lot of resources, but small enough to coordinate really well and benefit from specialization. And this was an easy way to gain critical mass. Instead of having to worry about trying to pack one university with complex system scholars, we can take advantage of those opportunities across Canada and also build the next generation of faculty members through that process. So the idea is to support collaboration around large funding initiatives, having that capacity to quickly respond, give ourselves a voice to advocate at funding agencies for complex system specific, sorry, just a second, initiatives. Help create training networks, support international networking with similar organizations, and then support collaborations with individual centers like the Santa Fe Institute or individual academic programs such as the Masters in Complex Systems at Arizona State or the PhD in Computational Social Science at George Mason. And so the important strategy here is to head off a tragedy of commons where universities within Canada are competing among themselves to be the one center for complex systems. And of course, if we don't know about the tragedy of the commons, we should. That's another seminar. So we first called from Wiki as a strategy to jumpstart this network. We had a call for external members that essentially is creating the structure for the Canadian Network for Complex Systems. These three member categories: external node coordinator, that is someone who basically wants to take an active role at their own institution or their geographic area. James Shelley is the perfect example of that, as he's begun the Complex Adaptive Systems Lab there at Western. External core members are faculty members or other scholars, even in practice, who are engaged in long-term research on complex systems. And we also have external affiliate researchers who participate in activities. It can be university faculty and non-university researchers, including postdocs. So where are we now? Through that call, we actually had a really great response. We've developed a very strong Cascadia node, including the Cascade Institute, University of Victoria, British Columbia, both Vancouver and Okanagan, and Simon Fraser University. On the other coast, we have Roger White, who is a pioneer in complex systems and fractals in urban cities. We're developing a very strong node in the Montreal area. And of course, in Ontario, we have University of Waterloo, Western, and the University of Guelph. So as we move forward with visioning at our university, the vision expanded to incorporate a couple other what we think are important missing pieces, not just to build this critical mass of complex system scholarship and advance the generation, the the discipline, but to advance the next generation, and not only through training, but through placement of junior scholars. And in addition, when we look at what Canada might do that differentiates itself from other international organizations, have the applied focus, really demonstrate through practice and application what complex systems, methods, and theories can do. And that has been a really important missing piece in complex systems research. So what are some of the networking goals to identify and publicize active complex systems researchers in Canada? Provide scholar matchmaking services, whether that's trading expertise, data, research support for collaboration, student supervision, student exams, grant partnerships, network analysis research. This is already in progress. I'll show you a little bit of that. And I think that Western Complex Adaptive Systems Lab has their own efforts in progress. And again, support professional development and exposure for our junior scholars. So definitely there's a strong educational and motivation for developing this network. One idea that preceded the idea of the Canadian Network for Complex Systems and is still latent was a proposal by a group of MDs affiliated with Wiki to develop systems thinking curriculum for medical schools. And obviously with Western having a medical school, perhaps this is an initiative where they can jump back on board and bring that initiative forward. A network is a great way to provide access to get started educational materials. We're having ideas about hosting methodological workshops, delivering modules that could be delivered across institutions. There are actually already a lot of great international resources, such as the Complexity Explorer classes, but we're already beginning to do this with the SMART training program I'll mention in a minute, where we're developing a methods cafe that has lectures from different faculty, and those materials will be up on the website soon. Definitely, there's been a lot of enthusiasm for a summer school, potentially with rotating hosting. This would be a great venue for our students to also have the opportunity to present their research at the Canadian scale. And discussions already underway in one topical area, but certainly a great thing to do would be to apply for more network training grants. And this gets to just a little footnote here. When we think about training grants for complex systems, the real challenge is complex systems is highly interdisciplinary, and the training grants we have to date in Canada through NSERC focus only on natural science. So perhaps there is an opportunity for all of us complex systems scholars to get together and advocate, try counsel for instance, frontiers training grants that support interdisciplinary training. So our Canadian Network for Complex Systems is already bearing fruit. Yes, those are cabbages on the right. My very favorite Savoy cabbage. Essentially, through our networking, Wiki was connected with Laurette Dubé from McGill, who's a very active scholar, and she connected us with David Ma at the University of Guelph, and myself to other Wiki members, and Wiki as an institution were included on this Smart Healthy Cities Research Training platform. Basically, the grant is about training new scholars for implementation science in healthy cities. Our hook was to bring a systems approach to that challenge, to implementation science in particular, and the grant was supported by a narrative about the pandemic cabbage shortage and how that illustrated food systems as complex systems. So this is an example, $5 million across 10 institutions, facilitating training materials of the sort of thing that we can do as a network that will have longer term benefits. So there's also been a lot of discussion about complex systems and this network as a way to support collaboration and interdisciplinary scholarship goals. So for instance, serve as a model and a catalyst for individual institutions to invest in development of their own complex systems nodes. And Western's Complex Systems Adaptive Systems Lab is again a great example of that. Again, enable this cultural shift towards community and interdisciplinary engagement, um, and really celebrate complex systems as an applied science, not just a theoretical science. There is a strong mandate to reduce the analytical and language barriers to facilitate collaboration across fields so that we're inclusive of arts, um, qualitative social sciences, and other related endeavors. Reduce the barriers between theory and practice, and the abstract and concrete, or the abstract and the empirical, and bring together those who have theory and tools with those who have problems to be solved. We also proposed, we've been doing this a bit for our Wiki renewal, that we work together to identify grand challenges for complexity sciences that we as a Canadian network are particularly well positioned to contribute to. We certainly want to have the network directly support engagement with governmental actors at all levels. That could be Environment and Climate Change Canada, it could be other levels of government, provincial. Hopefully we will get funds to host retreats to deepen connections. I was hearing about a retreat at Banff. That would be fantastic, but even virtual interactions can be great. Have a way to communicate funding priorities and have a way to quickly respond to large multi-institutional grant and infrastructure initiatives, such as the CREF that's open now, the Frontiers larger grants, partnership grants, et cetera, et cetera. So a tiny snapshot of what the Canadian network looks like, sort of, kind of, and with caveats. Janelle Pareter, and I apologize, Janelle, I pronounce your name wrong sometimes, conducted a great project for Wiki, conducting bibliometric analysis to explore complex system scholarship through our Complex Systems Center at UW and across Canada. So she and I developed, Janelle is a PhD candidate in the Balsillie School at the University of Waterloo. And she and I developed a complex systems keyword query, actually working on a model that our colleagues at the Paris Complex Systems Network developed, and resulted in a Scopus search. So we developed this with best practice keywords in mind. Janelle was able to validate the query because we have all of our core members self-report their publications. And she also did a Scopus search of all publications of our Wiki members. And it turns out that although our query found some 6,000 documents, I think, at UW, it missed a really high percentage of the publications that our core members considered to be complex systems related. Those tended more to be in the social science and health science research. In short, our quantitative keywords are picking up mostly computer science, math, and engineering, and missing out on other things. So put complex systems in your keywords. We're recommending that to everybody. So across Canada, Janelle also looked at the top 5 institutions using this more limited Scopus query. And because of limitations in Scopus and SciVal, she divided that into 2 groups, one medical subjects and one all other subjects. But this is pretty interesting, you know, as we're in a virtual conference at a place with a medical school. So I tried to make this font larger right before, but I think basically the top institution is the University of Toronto, followed by UBC, McGill, University of Alberta, and University of Montreal. Now, this is 2014 to 2018. It would be interesting to see how Western might emerge into this hierarchy as time goes on. When we look at the non-complex systems, again, University of Toronto and I can't see UBC are quite up there at the top, as is McGill. University of Waterloo is in the top 5, and the other is University of Alberta, which is interesting because we don't have any That's a completely open territory for us, although we do now have these authors we can contact. Um, so the nice thing looking at this is, other than University of Alberta, most of these key institutions are already within our network and we already have contacts. If we look at the Canada-wide medical query, we do see a lot of definitely indications of applied work. Um, I'll leave this to you. The slides, I'm sure, will be available. We can put them on the Wiki website if we need. If we look at the non-medical query, again, this reflects the fact that our current query is really picking up a lot of math, engineering, computer science work and maybe missing out on some of the other work. Like, we know there's incredible strength in climate change research from a social science perspective, complex systems perspective. Now, if we compare that Canada-wide to the Wiki all members thematic areas, this is all publications of Wiki members, we see a lot of overlap. And in a sense, that's promising, but we also see the network as a way to fill in gaps. And here you can see climate change very big at UW, as well as agent-based modeling, autonomous agents. So we did a little scan a couple years ago, looking at these bullet points that reflect the areas of current strength at University of Waterloo. And it would be wonderful moving forward, perhaps using some automated keyword searches or self-identified keyword to broaden this for our Canadian network as a whole as we move forward. And again, that will help us very efficiently identify where is our capacity, what do we have the capacity to respond to quickly when there's an opportunity. So what's the problem now? Well, funding. Wiki receives very minimal funds from the University of Waterloo, and we need some seed funds to further develop this Canadian network for complex systems. Luckily, seed funds, things like workshop funds, are pretty easy to come by, either through tri-council agencies or through individual programs. So we'll be excited to talk to people about that option. We need to further explore the vision and potential structure, hopefully maybe by summer 2023, developing some institutional bylaws. Our current network formed mainly via snowball communications. Right now, we do have that bibliometric analysis where we could send out email blasts, but please continue to expand our network via your snowball communications and your collaborators. Brenda has just posted an updated external membership call. The burden for that should be fairly light. And the great thing is then we're all on the same website and we're all in the same database. So encourage you. I think we already automatically link to Western's Complex Adaptive Systems Center, but we can coordinate that. But again, share with your colleagues. So when we think of building this Canadian network for complex systems, these slides were taken from an old talk, and it had the definition: complex systems wholes more than the sum of their parts, where the behavior needs to be understood by looking at the components and how they interact, and that adaptive systems are living systems that survive and reproduce within dynamic selection environments using embedded rules and response actions. Well, let's apply that to ourselves as faculty members and to our self-developed institutions. Now, self-organization is a great idea and emergence exists, but there's no such thing as self-organization without leadership. You need that path dependence of the early adopters and the innovators to step forward. And luckily, we're seeing a lot of that leadership, at the Canadian scale. It's very much appreciated. But whatever governance structures we establish should be established keeping in mind that we ourselves are a complex system, and we need to figure out structures that will allow us to favorably adapt and be positively resilient as we move forward. So keeping in touch on our wiki.ca, there's a CNCS menu item, the last item. Please email info@wiki.ca to join our mailing list. We also post things like jobs and workshops, lots of things that are interesting to students, and we welcome you to share your complex systems news, whether that be a new publication, a new grant proposal, some student achievements, anything like that. And then all that social media thing, which I hear exists, all the links are up there. So thank you very much.